The hall was bigger than most cities. Thousands of beings from hundreds of different worlds sat in floating seats that adjusted to each species' unique body shape. Some breathed oxygen like humans. Others required methane tanks strapped to their backs. A few existed as pure energy, contained in crystalline shells that hummed with soft light. Jake Morrison stood at the center platform, looking small and ordinary compared to the massive chamber around him. He was 34 years old, with brown hair starting to gray at the temples, and a face that most people would forget 5 minutes after meeting him. He wore a simple dark suit, nothing fancy. His hands rested calmly at his sides as he waited for permission to speak. Next to him stood Lisa Hayes, a human military officer with sharp eyes and posture so straight it looked painful. She watched the alien delegates with the careful attention of someone trained to spot danger. Her hand occasionally moved toward her hip, where a weapon would normally hang, then stopped when she remembered weapons weren't allowed in the council hall. Chancellor Kron floated at the front of the chamber. He was a being of pure thought, his consciousness housed in a sphere of swirling silver mist. His voice came from everywhere and nowhere when he spoke. The council recognizes the human delegation. You may present your request. Jake stepped forward. His voice was steady and clear as he began. Thank you, Chancellor. The United Earth Assembly requests access to the Galactic Technology Sharing Program. Specifically, we're asking for Level 3 clearance, which would allow us to receive advanced medical technology, faster-than-light communication systems, and energy production methods. A sound like rattling metal came from the left side of the chamber. Ambassador Vera Quinn rose from her seat, her insectoid body reflecting the light in sharp angles. She was Thalaxian, a species known across the galaxy for their intelligence and their absolute certainty that they were better than everyone else. Her forearms gestured dismissively. The chair recognizes Ambassador Vera, Chancellor Kron said, though his tone suggested he wasn't happy about it. This is absurd, Vera's voice clicked and buzzed in a way that made human ears hurt. Her translator chip rendered it into galactic standard, but the contempt came through perfectly. Humans have been part of this council for barely 50 years. They still use chemical rockets for half their space travel. Their computer systems are primitive. And let us not forget their delightful history of solving every problem by hitting it with a stick. Laughter rippled through the chamber. Not all species joined in, but enough did to make Jake's jaw tighten slightly. Lisa's hand moved toward her hip again. Ambassador Vera, humanity has contributed significantly to galactic peace efforts. We've mediated 17 conflicts in the past decade alone. We've shared our agricultural technology freely, which has helped feed 3 colony worlds through famine. We've asked for nothing in return, until now. Vera's laugh sounded like breaking glass. Mediation, is that what you call it? You mean you talked at people until they agreed just to make you stop? And your agricultural technology? She made a dismissive gesture with 2 of her arms. You grow plants in dirt. Congratulations on mastering the most basic form of food production known to civilization. More laughter. Some species tried to hide it, but others didn't bother. A delegate from the Centauri system, a being that looked like a walking tree, made a sound that might have been a chuckle. Your weapons are toys, Vera continued, warming to her subject now. Your ships are slow. Your diplomacy is clumsy. You are, in essence, children playing at being adults. And you want us to give you technology that took our species thousands of years to develop? Technology you could never create on your own? Jake's face remained calm, but his hands had curled into fists at his sides. Lisa touched his elbow gently, a reminder to stay professional. He took a slow breath and unclenched his fingers. With respect, Ambassador, Jake said. and his tone made the word respect sound very tired. Humanity has proven capable of rapid technological advancement. In the century since we developed nuclear power, we've gone from basic computers to artificial intelligence, from ground-based telescopes to deep space exploration. Yes, Vera interrupted, waving all four arms now. You've climbed very quickly up a very small hill. How impressive. Meanwhile, species in this chamber have been traveling between stars since before your planet had multicellular life. She turned to address the entire assembly. I propose we deny this request immediately. Giving advanced technology to humans would be like giving a plasma rifle to a barely evolved primate. Dangerous and pointless. The chamber erupted in debate. Some species voiced agreement with Vera. Others argued that humanity deserved a chance. A few seemed to be arguing about something completely different, possibly due to translator errors. The noise built and built, until Chancellor Kron's voice cut through it all. Silence. The word wasn't loud, but it carried weight that made everyone stop talking. Ambassador Vera, your concerns are noted. However, this council does not make decisions based on assumptions or prejudice. We evaluate each species fairly. Vera's mouthparts moved in what might have been a smile. Then, let the humans prove they deserve such technology. Let them demonstrate that they are more than violent primitives who stumbled into space travel. Let them show us something, anything, that suggests they belong at the advanced technology table. She sat down, her body language radiating smug satisfaction. She'd trapped them. How could humanity prove they deserved technology they didn't have access to yet? It was circular logic, and everyone in the chamber knew it. Jake stood very still for a long moment. Lisa watched him carefully, trying to read his expression. She'd worked with him for 3 years, and still couldn't always tell what he was thinking. Right now, his face showed nothing except careful consideration. Finally, Jake spoke. His voice was quiet, but in the silent chamber, everyone heard him clearly. Then perhaps a demonstration is in order. Vera's laugh was sharp and mocking. What could you possibly demonstrate that would change anyone's mind? More agricultural techniques? A PowerPoint presentation about human achievement? The sarcasm was thick enough to cut with a knife. Jake looked directly at her. His eyes were calm and very, very cold. I'll need 3 standard days to prepare. Then I'll show this council exactly what humanity is capable of. I'll show you what we really are, beneath all the assumptions and mockery. The chamber went quiet. Something in Jake's tone made even Vera pause. Chancellor Kron's silver mist swirled thoughtfully. This is highly irregular. But not forbidden, Jake said. The council charter allows any species to present evidence supporting their requests. I'm asking for time to gather that evidence. Kron was silent for a moment, then spoke. Very well. This council will reconvene in 3 standard days. The human delegation will have 1 hour to make their presentation. This session is adjourned. As the delegates began to file out, talking among themselves, Vera approached Jake. She looked down at him from her greater height, her alien features arranged in obvious disdain. I look forward to seeing what you've prepared, human, though I suspect it will only further prove my point about your species. You simply don't belong here among the truly advanced civilizations. Jake met her gaze without flinching. 3 days, Ambassador. Then we'll see who belongs where. Vera walked away, and Lisa moved close to Jake. Her voice was low and urgent. Jake, what are you planning? We don't have anything prepared. No presentation, no demonstration, nothing that could possibly change their minds. Jake watched Vera's retreating form. No, he agreed quietly. We don't have anything prepared. But Earth does. They've been keeping something classified for 30 years, waiting for the right moment to reveal it. He looked at Lisa, and she saw something in his expression that made her deeply uneasy. I think this is that moment. What are you talking about? What's been classified? But Jake was already walking toward the exit, pulling out his communication device. I need to make some calls. Secure channels only. And Lisa, get ready. In 3 days, everyone in this galaxy is going to see humanity very differently. Lisa stood alone on the platform, watching him go. Around her, the massive chamber emptied. Somewhere in the crowd, she heard Vera's clicking laugh, still mocking them. She didn't know what Jake had planned, but she knew one thing for certain. The next 3 days were going to be very interesting. The human delegation quarters on Kepler Prime were nice enough, but they felt too small after spending time in the massive council hall. Lisa found Jake in the secure communications room, staring at a screen filled with encrypted text. He'd been there for 6 hours straight, and the coffee cup next to him had gone cold 3 times. Jake, you need to talk to me. Lisa closed the door behind her and activated the privacy shield. The air shimmered slightly as the field engaged, blocking all outside surveillance. The entire delegation is worried. We've got people from Earth Command asking questions. The Secretary General herself called twice, and you won't tell anyone what you're planning. Jake didn't look away from the screen. I can't. Not yet. If word leaks about what I'm going to show them, it could cause problems. Diplomatic incidents. Maybe worse. Worse than getting humanity laughed out of the Galactic Council? Lisa pulled a chair over and sat down hard. Vera is telling everyone who will listen that you're going to embarrass us. Half the delegates think this is funny. The other half think we're desperate. Let them think that. Jake finally turned to look at her. His eyes were tired, but there was something else there too. Something hard and determined. Lisa, I need you to trust me. In 3 days, everything changes. Either humanity gets the respect we deserve, or we find out we never belonged here in the first place. That's not reassuring. It's not meant to be. Jake turned back to his screen. I've requested classified military files from Earth, personnel records from the outer colonies, battle reports that have been sealed for 3 decades. It's all being compiled now. Lisa felt her stomach drop. Battle reports? Jake, what war are you talking about? We haven't had a major conflict since we joined the council. Just minor skirmishes with pirates and... She stopped, her eyes going wide. You're not talking about the Krell. Jake's silence was answer enough. Jake, that's classified for a reason. The Krell situation was handled quietly. Most species don't even know humans were involved. If you reveal what really happened, then they'll know the truth. Jake's voice was flat. They'll know that humanity isn't just some primitive species that got lucky. They'll know what we're really capable of when pushed. Lisa stood up so fast, her chair fell over. You're going to start a panic. Species will see us as a threat. Everything we've built over the past 50 years, all the goodwill, the alliances, it could all disappear because you want to prove a point to Vera. This isn't about Vera. Jake stood too, facing her. This is about respect. Real respect, not the polite tolerance we get now. Every species in that council looks at us like we're children. Useful sometimes, cute even, but not real players in galactic politics. We get invited to mediate conflicts because we're neutral, not because anyone values our opinion. We get agricultural contracts because our food is cheap, not because they respect our science. And when we ask for something we actually need, we get laughed at. So your solution is to scare them? My solution is to remind them that respect based on fear is still respect, and that humanity earned our place here, even if they don't remember how. Lisa picked up her chair and sat down again, rubbing her face with both hands. You're gambling with our entire future. I know. Jake sat too, and some of the hardness left his expression. I know, Lisa. But we're going to lose anyway if we don't do this. Vera made sure of that. She turned our request into a joke. Even if we got the technology now, every species would see it as charity to the poor, stupid humans. I can't accept that. We deserve better. Before Lisa could respond, the communication console beeped. Jake touched the screen, and a secure channel opened. The face that appeared was older, weathered, with the kind of scars that came from real combat. "General Carter," Jake said, straightening slightly, "thank you for taking my call." "Morrison," the general's voice was rough, "I got your request. Had to go through 3 levels of clearance just to confirm it was really you asking." "You understand what you're requesting? These files have been sealed since the war ended. There are good reasons for that." "I understand, sir, but I have authorization from the Secretary General to access them for diplomatic purposes." Carter grunted. "Diplomatic purposes. That's one way to put it." He glanced at something off-screen. "I was there, you know, during the final push. Lost a lot of good people fighting the Krell. Lost even more in the aftermath, helping them rebuild." His eyes focused back on Jake. "Once it's out there, we can't take it back." "I'm sure, sir. The Council needs to understand what humanity really is. What we can do when we have to." "What we can do," Carter repeated slowly. "Son, what we did to the Krell wasn't something to be proud of. We won, yes. We survived. But the cost." He shook his head. "Make sure this is really necessary. Make sure it's worth it." "It is, sir." Carter was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. "Files are being transmitted now. Secure channel. Eyes-only clearance. You'll have everything within the hour." He leaned closer to the camera. "Morrison, the younger generation doesn't remember the Krell War. They don't understand what it took to survive it. Maybe that's for the best. But if you're going to show them all of it. The good and the bad. The victories and the moral compromises. Don't let them think war is glorious." "I won't, sir. Thank you." Lisa and Jake sat in silence for a while. Finally, Lisa spoke. "I served in the fleet for 10 years. I thought I knew our military history. But I never saw full records of the Krell War. It was always summarized. Border conflict, resolved through diplomatic pressure. That's what the history books say." "The history books lie," Jake said quietly. "Not exactly lie, maybe, but they leave things out, important things." Over the next hour, files appeared on Jake's screen. Battle reports, casualty lists, tactical assessments. Footage from ship cameras and colony security systems. Lisa watched over his shoulder, and with each new file, her face grew paler. "This many casualties?" she whispered. 15 million in the first month alone? The Krell didn't believe in warning shots. Jake scrolled through a tactical report. They believed in overwhelming force. Show your enemy that resistance is useless, and they'll surrender without a fight. It worked for them for thousands of years. But it didn't work on us. No. Jake opened a file showing human factory output during the war years. It didn't work on us. Meanwhile, outside the secure communications room, the rest of the human delegation was trying to handle the fallout from Jake's challenge. Ambassador Vera wasn't being subtle about her victory. She'd given 3 interviews to Galactic news services, each one more mocking than the last. The humans are scrambling, she told one reporter, a floating jellyfish creature from the Andromeda sector. They thought they could bluff their way into advanced technology. Now they're realizing they have nothing to show. I almost feel sorry for them. Almost. Word spread quickly through Kepler Prime. The upcoming demonstration became the talk of every bar, restaurant, and hotel on the station. Most species were curious to see what humanity would present. Many were placing bets on how badly the humans would fail. A few, though, remembered things that others had forgotten. Elder Moss, the Centaurian delegate who'd spoken to Lisa after the session, spent the evening in his quarters reviewing old files. He was one of the few council members old enough to remember when the Krell had been a major power. He also remembered when they'd suddenly stopped being one. He'd never connected humanity to the Krell collapse before. The timeline was right, but humans had been so new to galactic politics, so seemingly weak and primitive. The idea that they could bring down a species that had conquered dozens of worlds seemed impossible. But Moss had lived a long time. He'd seen impossible things before. On the second day, Jake finally emerged from the communications room. He gathered the human delegation in a secure conference room and stood before them. "I can't tell you everything I'm going to show the council," he began. "But I can tell you this. What you're about to learn might change how you see humanity. It might change how you see yourself as a human. Some of you will be proud, some will be disturbed, but all of you need to understand that this is necessary." One of the younger diplomats, a woman named Kate Brooks, raised her hand. "Jake, people are saying you're going to reveal military secrets. Is that true?" "Yes." The room erupted in worried conversation. Jake let it go on for a minute, then raised his hand for silence. "We have a choice. We can be the friendly, harmless species that everyone tolerates, but nobody respects. Or we can be honest about who and what we are." "I choose honesty." "Even if it makes them fear us?" another diplomat asked. "Especially if it makes them fear us," Jake said. "Because fear and respect often come from the same place. Understanding that someone is dangerous, but chooses not to be. That's real power. That's real diplomacy." Lisa stood at the back of the room, watching Jake address the delegation. She still wasn't sure this was the right move, but she understood why he was doing it. All her life, she'd watched humanity be treated like the galaxy's younger sibling. Cute, energetic, sometimes useful, never truly equal. If Jake's plan worked, that would change forever. If it didn't, they might never recover. On the third day, an hour before the council was set to reconvene, Jake made one final call to Earth. The Secretary General appeared on screen, looking serious. "Everything is ready," Jake told her. "Once I start the presentation, there's no going back. Are you certain you want me to proceed?" The Secretary General looked at him for a long moment. "Ambassador Vera insulted our entire species. She called us barely evolved primates. She mocked our achievements and dismissed our contributions. If we let that stand, we're accepting her definition of what humanity is." She leaned forward. "Show them, Jake. Show them what we really are. All of it." "Yes, ma'am." As Jake prepared to leave for the council hall, Lisa caught up with him in the corridor. "Whatever happens, I've got your back." Jake managed a tired smile. "I know, thank you." They walked together toward the massive chamber, where thousands of aliens waited to see humanity embarrass itself. Jake carried a small data chip in his pocket. Everything was on that chip. 30 years of secrets, 30 years of carefully maintained silence. In 1 hour, that silence would be broken forever. The council hall was more crowded than Lisa had ever seen it. Word had spread across Kepler Prime that something interesting was about to happen. Species that normally didn't attend council sessions had shown up just to watch the humans make fools of themselves. The floating seats were packed, and some delegates were standing in the back sections. Ambassador Vera sat in a prominent position, her forearms folded in what looked like satisfaction. She'd made sure everyone knew this was her doing. She'd challenged the humans, and now she would watch them fail. Jake stood at the center platform again, looking just as ordinary as he had 3 days before. He wore the same simple dark suit. His hands were steady as he loaded the data chip into the presentation system. Lisa stood behind him, trying to look confident. Chancellor Kron's voice filled the chamber. "The council is now in session. Ambassador Morrison, you have 1 hour to present your demonstration. The floor is yours." Jake didn't waste time on pleasantries. He touched a control, and the massive holographic display in the center of the chamber flickered to life. It showed a planet, blue and green and white, with swirling clouds and deep oceans. "This is Earth," Jake said simply. His voice carried clearly through the chamber. "Our homeworld. Population 12 billion. third planet from a yellow star in what most species consider a fairly unremarkable part of the galaxy. Some delegates shifted in their seats, clearly expecting something more dramatic. Vera made a sound that might have been a laugh. Jake continued, unbothered by the reaction. Earth is what we call a Class M planet. The temperature ranges from -70 degrees in winter to over 50 degrees in summer, depending on location. We have deserts where nothing grows for thousands of miles. We have frozen wastelands where the wind can kill an unprotected person in minutes. We have jungles so thick that humans can get lost 50 feet from a road. The hologram shifted, showing images of Earth's harshest environments. Endless sand dunes, ice sheets kilometers thick, dense rainforests where the sunlight barely reached the ground. This is where we evolved, Jake said. This is our cradle. And compared to many worlds in this galaxy, Earth is actually quite nice. A delegate from a water world, a species that looked like an upright octopus, made a gesture of confusion. Many species evolved on challenging worlds, Ambassador. This is not unique to humans. You're absolutely right, Jake agreed. It's not unique, but it's relevant context for what I'm about to show you. He touched another control. Humans are what biologists call persistence hunters. On Earth, we're not the fastest species. We're not the strongest. We can't fly. We can't breathe underwater without equipment. But we can do something that very few species can do. The hologram showed footage of a human running. Just running, steady and constant across an open plain. We can run for hours without stopping. Sometimes for days. Human hunters used to chase prey animals until the animals literally collapsed from exhaustion. We would follow them, track them, never giving up, until the animal's body simply shut down from fatigue. Then we would catch it and kill it and feed our families. Several herbivore species in the chamber made uncomfortable sounds. The concept of being hunted until exhaustion was nightmare fuel for prey species. We also heal very well, Jake continued. The hologram showed medical scans. A human can survive injuries that would kill many species. Broken bones heal in weeks. We can lose significant blood and recover. We've survived falls from great heights, exposure to extreme temperatures, even having parts of our organs removed. We're very, very hard to kill. Jake paused, letting that sink in. Then he continued. But survival alone isn't what makes humanity notable. Many species are survivors. What makes humans different is what we do with that survival instinct. We adapt. We learn. We improve. The hologram shifted to show human history. Not the violent parts, but the progress. Stone tools becoming metal tools. Fire being tamed and controlled. Wheels being invented. Writing systems developing across different continents. 10,000 years ago, humans lived in small tribes, hunting and gathering food. We had no cities, no writing, no mathematics. Today, we have spacecraft, artificial intelligence, medical technology that can extend life by decades. We went from caves to quantum computers in the span of recorded history. That's not slow progress, Ambassador Vera. That's exceptional progress. Vera shifted in her seat, but didn't respond. We also learned to cooperate, despite our differences. Look around this chamber. Most of you come from worlds where your species is relatively uniform. Maybe a few different cultures, but basically the same biology, the same basic worldview. He touched the control again. The hologram showed Earth's incredible diversity. Different cultures, different languages, different belief systems. On Earth, humans developed thousands of distinct cultures. We speak over 7,000 different languages. We have hundreds of religions. We've fought wars over differences in skin color, in beliefs, in resources. And yet, we learned to work together. Because we had to. Because survival demanded it. Some delegates were leaning forward now, more interested. This wasn't the presentation they'd expected. Jake wasn't begging for respect. He was stating facts, calm and measured. When humanity reached space, Jake continued, we did it together, not as separate nations competing, but as a unified species with a common goal. That unity is one of our greatest strengths. We learned that cooperation beats conflict. We learned it the hard way, through centuries of war and suffering. But we learned. The hologram shifted again, showing human space stations and colonies. We've been part of this council for 50 years. In that time, we've contributed to 17 peace negotiations. We've provided food aid to 3 worlds suffering from famine. We've shared our medical research freely with any species that asked for it. We've tried to be good neighbors in this galaxy. Jake stopped speaking. He stood very still, looking out at the assembled delegates. The chamber was quiet. Then, slowly and deliberately, he continued. And for all of that, we get mocked. We get called primitives. We get told we're not worthy of the same opportunities other species receive. We get laughed at when we ask for help. Vera started to speak, but Jake held up a hand. His voice, when it came, was cold and hard. I'm not finished, Ambassador. Something in his tone made Vera close her mouth. Even Chancellor Kron seemed surprised by the steel in Jake's words. You asked what humans could demonstrate that would prove our worth, Jake said, addressing Vera directly. You wanted to see something that showed we deserve a place at the advanced technology table. You wanted proof that we're more than violent children playing with fire. He touched the control one more time. Let me show you what humans do when we're pushed to our limits. The hologram changed. It showed a star map, a section of space near human territory. Several systems were marked in red. 42 years ago, shortly after humanity joined the Galactic Council, we were contacted by a species called the Krell. Does anyone here remember the Krell? Murmurs ran through the chamber. Some of the older delegates nodded. Younger species looked confused. The Krell were a warrior race, Jake explained. They'd conquered 17 worlds over the course of 2,000 years. They were technologically advanced, militarily powerful, and absolutely certain of their superiority. They ranked among the top 10 military powers in the galaxy. Jake let that information settle. The Krell decided that human colonies would make good additions to their empire. They sent an envoy to Earth with a simple message: surrender or be destroyed. The hologram showed images of Krell ships, large, angular, covered in weapons. They looked dangerous, even in a still image. Humanity refused to surrender, Jake said quietly. The Krell found that amusing. They thought we were being stupid. Brave, maybe, but stupid. So, they sent their fleet to teach us a lesson. The hologram began playing footage, real footage, from security cameras and ship recordings. Krell vessels arriving at human colonies, weapons firing, stations exploding, ships trying to evacuate civilians while under fire. The images were brutal and hard to watch. They killed 15 million people in the first month, Jake said, his voice flat and emotionless. Civilians mostly, families, children. The Krell believed in overwhelming force. They thought if they hit us hard enough, fast enough, we would surrender. They thought we were like other species they'd conquered. Weak, easily broken. Jake paused. When he spoke again, his voice carried across the silent chamber. They were wrong. The hologram shifted. Now it showed human factories working around the clock. Engineers examining captured Krell technology. Scientists running tests. Military personnel training for combat. Everything moving at frantic speed. Humans don't break, Jake said. We adapt. Within 3 weeks of the first attack, we had reverse-engineered Krell shield technology. Within 2 months, we'd improved it. Within 6 months, our weapons could punch through Krell armor that had been considered impenetrable. The footage showed space battles. Human ships at first being destroyed easily, then starting to fight back more effectively. The tactics evolving, the humans learning. The Krell had been fighting wars for 2,000 years, Jake continued. They were experts at warfare. They had strategies that had won them dozens of conflicts, but they'd never fought humans before. They didn't understand what makes us dangerous. Jake looked directly at Vera again. We learn, Ambassador. We learn very, very quickly, especially when our survival depends on it. The hologram showed more battles, more human ships, more Krell vessels being destroyed. The tide of war slowly shifting. After 1 year of fighting, we'd stopped losing ground. After 2 years, we were pushing into Krell territory. After 3 years, Jake touched the control. The hologram showed a planet, the Krell homeworld, and surrounding it, a massive human fleet. After 3 years, we reached their home. The chamber was absolutely silent now. Even the background hum of life support systems seemed too loud. We had won, Jake said simply. We'd defeated a species that had been conquering worlds for millennia, and we'd done it in 3 years. Some delegates were staring at the hologram. Others were staring at Jake. Lisa stood behind him, watching the crowd, her hand near her hip again, even though she had no weapon. But winning and ending a war are two different things, Jake continued. And this is where I need to show you what humans really are. Not just warriors, not just survivors, but something more complicated than that. He touched the control, and the hologram showed the Krell homeworld again, waiting for what happened next. Jake stood very still, looking at the hologram of the Krell homeworld, surrounded by human ships. The silence in the chamber was complete. Even Ambassador Vera had stopped making dismissive sounds. What I'm about to show you, Jake said quietly, has been classified by human governments for 30 years. The Council Charter allows for revelation of classified materials when necessary for diplomatic purposes. I've received authorization from Earth's United Assembly to proceed. He took a breath. What happened next at the Krell homeworld defines who humanity really is. The hologram showed the fleet in position. Hundreds of human ships in orbital formation. The data scrolling across the bottom of the display showed weapons locked, shields at maximum, troops ready for planetary assault. We had multiple options, Jake explained. We could have bombarded the planet from orbit. Krell cities, military installations, government centers. We had the firepower to destroy their entire civilization in a matter of days. We could have used biological weapons. During the war, our scientists had developed several diseases that specifically targeted Krell biology. We could have rendered their homeworld uninhabitable. Several delegates made sounds of shock. Biological weapons were banned under galactic law, though many species secretly maintained them. We could have, Jake repeated, emphasizing the words. But we didn't. Instead, we sent a communication to the Krell government. A simple message. Surrender now, or face the consequences. The hologram showed the response from the Krell leadership. It was short and filled with contempt. Jake read it aloud. You are weak. Your mercy is weakness. We will never surrender to inferior beings. Do your worst. Jake's jaw tightened. So we did. The hologram changed, showing the human fleet moving into a different formation. Something else. We blockaded the planet, Jake said. Complete blockade. Nothing in, nothing out. We disabled their communication satellites, cut off all supply lines from their colony worlds, destroyed any ship that tried to leave or enter the system. And then, he paused, we waited. The hologram showed the passage of time, days turning into weeks, weeks into months. The human fleet maintaining position, never attacking, never leaving, Just waiting. The Krell government was confident at first, Jake continued. They had supplies. They had their homeworld's resources. They thought they could outlast a blockade. What they didn't understand is that humans are very, very good at waiting. We're persistence hunters, remember? We can track prey for days without stopping. We can wait out any opponent. Time is a weapon we know how to use. The hologram showed intelligence reports from inside the Krell homeworld. Food shortages, medical supply problems, infrastructure breaking down without parts from the colonies, unrest in the cities. 6 months into the blockade, the Krell government still refused to surrender. They tried to break through our lines 3 times. We destroyed every ship that made the attempt. We didn't board them. We didn't capture prisoners. We simply eliminated the threat and went back to waiting. Jake's voice was flat, emotionless, as he narrated the historical data. But Lisa could see the tension in his shoulders, the weight of what he was revealing. After 1 year, the Krell economy collapsed. Without trade from their colonies, without new resources, their system simply couldn't sustain itself. Different factions within their government began to turn on each other, blaming each other for the war, for the losses, for the situation they found themselves in. The hologram showed riots in Krell cities. Military forces fighting each other instead of preparing to fight humans. Civil war, Jake said quietly. We didn't fire a single shot at their planet. We didn't kill a single civilian in their cities. But by forcing them to face their own limitations, by showing them they were trapped and we controlled their fate, we destroyed their government more thoroughly than any bombardment could have. He touched the control. The hologram showed Krell colony worlds, now cut off from their homeworld, beginning to make their own decisions. Some declared independence. Others formed new alliances with neighboring species. A few reached out to humanity for help. The Krell Empire, which had stood for 2,000 years, collapsed in 18 months. Not because we destroyed it, but because we proved we could, and made them watch as that reality tore them apart from within. Several delegates were standing now, staring at the hologram. Others looked impressed. A few looked calculating, clearly reassessing their strategic opinions about humanity. Ambassador Vera had gone very still. Her forearms were no longer folded in satisfaction. They hung at her sides, and her mouth parts moved wordlessly. By the time the Krell were ready to negotiate, Jake continued, there was no central government left to negotiate with. We ended up making 17 separate peace agreements with 17 different Krell factions. Some of their colony worlds joined other federations. Some became independent. Some, he paused, some asked if they could join the human sphere of influence. The hologram showed human ships delivering supplies to Krell worlds. Medical teams helping with disease outbreaks. Engineers rebuilding infrastructure. The images were dated across several years. We spent the next 20 years helping them rebuild, Jake said, providing aid, technology, medical assistance. Not because we had to. Not because they deserved it. But because that's what humans do after the fighting stops. We help. We rebuild. We try to make things better than they were before. He touched the control, and the hologram showed current images of former Krell worlds. Peaceful cities, farms and factories, children playing in streets that had once been war zones. Many former Krell colonies are now among our closest allies, Jake said. They trade with us freely. Their students attend our universities. Their artists perform in our cities. We have more in common with them than we did when they were trying to conquer us. Jake turned to face the full council, his eyes moving across the assembled species. We never revealed publicly what happened during the Krell War. We kept it classified because we didn't want to be known as the species that broke the Krell Empire. We wanted to be known as the species that helped them rebuild. That's why most of you didn't know humans were involved in the Krell collapse. We chose to let history forget our role. Chancellor Kron's silver mist swirled with what might have been surprise. Ambassador Morrison, why reveal this now? You could have used this information for leverage years ago. Jake's answer was simple and direct. Because we didn't want to be feared, Chancellor. We wanted to be respected. There's a difference. Fear makes species act defensively, irrationally. Respect creates cooperation and trust. We chose trust. He looked at Vera. But when we're mocked for our supposed weakness, when we're told we don't deserve a place at the table, it becomes necessary to remind everyone that we've already earned that place. In blood and fire, yes, but also in mercy and rebuilding. The hologram shifted one final time, showing a data comparison. On one side, the military capabilities of the Krell Empire at its height. On the other, current human military strength. The numbers were striking. In 40 years, humanity had advanced from barely being able to defend their colonies to matching what had been one of the galaxy's major powers. We learned fast, Jake said simply, especially when motivated. The Krell War taught us a lot about warfare, about technology, about ourselves. We took those lessons and built something stronger. Not because we want to conquer anyone, not because we enjoy violence, but because we understand that the galaxy is dangerous, and being able to defend ourselves is necessary for survival. He pulled the data chip from the presentation system. This chip contains full documentation of the Krell War, battle reports, casualty figures, tactical analyses, everything. I'm uploading it to the Council archives now. Anyone who wants to verify what I've shown you can review the complete record. The weight of revealing 30 years of secrets showed on his face. But his voice remained steady. Humanity isn't perfect. We're not the strongest species in the galaxy. We're not the smartest or the most advanced. But we're survivors. We're learners. And we're capable of both great violence and great mercy, depending on what the situation requires. That's what makes us dangerous. That's what makes us valuable. And that's why we deserve the same opportunities and respect given to any other species in this council. He stepped back from the podium. I have nothing more to add. The evidence speaks for itself. The council can make whatever decision it thinks is appropriate. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The chamber was so quiet that Lisa could hear her own heartbeat. Then slowly, delegates began to move. Some were pulling out communication devices, clearly reporting to their governments. Others were talking urgently to their aides. A few just sat in stunned silence. Elder Moss, the old Centaurian, rose from his seat. His voice creaked with age, but carried clearly. A question, Ambassador Morrison. Yes, Elder? You said humans chose mercy over destruction at the Krell homeworld, but the blockade killed thousands through starvation and civil war. How is that mercy? Jake didn't hesitate. Because we could have killed millions in a day, Elder. We chose a path that gave the Krell a chance to survive, even if that survival was painful. We gave them the opportunity to change, to rebuild, to become something better than they were. That's not perfect mercy, but it's the best mercy we could offer in the middle of a war for our own survival. Moss considered this, then slowly nodded. An honest answer, thank you. Another delegate stood, a species Jake didn't recognize. You say you kept this classified to avoid being feared, but revealing it now will create fear. How do you justify that? I don't, Jake admitted. I'm not happy about revealing classified information. But the alternative was accepting that humanity will always be treated as lesser, that we'll always be mocked and dismissed, that our children and grandchildren will grow up in a galaxy that doesn't respect them. He met the delegate's eyes. Fear fades with time and positive interaction. Contempt grows stronger if not challenged. I chose to challenge the contempt. More questions came. Jake answered them all, calmly and honestly. Lisa watched the crowd, trying to gauge reactions. It was mixed. Some species looked worried. Others looked thoughtful. A few seemed angry, though whether at humans or at having been kept in the dark, she couldn't tell. Through it all, Ambassador Vera sat frozen in her seat. She hadn't said a word since Jake began the presentation. Her earlier confidence had evaporated completely. She looked smaller somehow, despite her larger frame. Finally, Chancellor Kron's voice cut through the growing discussion. The Council will take a recess to review the information Ambassador Morrison has provided. We will reconvene in 2 hours to discuss humanity's request for technology sharing rights. This session is temporarily adjourned. As delegates began filing out, talking among themselves, Jake remained at the podium. He looked drained, like someone who'd just run a marathon. Lisa moved to his side. "You did it," she said quietly. "They know now." "Yes," Jake agreed. "They know. The question is, will it be enough?" They watched as Ambassador Vera finally stood and walked toward the exit. She moved like someone in shock, her usual arrogance completely gone. As she passed near the human delegation, she glanced at Jake. For a moment, their eyes met. Then she looked away and continued walking. "Everything changes now," Lisa said. Jake nodded slowly. Everything changes now. The 2-hour recess felt like 2 days. Jake sat in the delegation's private room, not speaking, not moving much, just staring at the wall. Lisa brought him coffee that he didn't drink. Other members of the human delegation tried to talk to him, but he gave short answers and then went back to staring. "Do you think we made a mistake?" Kate Brooks finally asked. She was young, only 26, and this was her first major diplomatic assignment. Some of those species looked scared when they left. Really scared. Jake finally looked at her. "Maybe. We'll find out soon enough." "But if they're scared of us now, won't that make everything harder?" "Fear and respect are complicated," Jake said. "Sometimes they're the same thing. Sometimes they're opposites. The key is what you do with the fear. If you use it to threaten people, to bully them, then it becomes a problem. If you use it to establish boundaries, to make sure people take you seriously, then it can be useful." Lisa leaned against the wall, arms crossed. The Krell were feared. Look how that ended for them. "The Krell used fear as a weapon," Jake replied. "They conquered through terror. That's different from being capable of violence, but choosing not to use it. The galaxy needs to understand that humans are dangerous, but only when pushed. There's a difference." A message came through on the communication console. The council was reconvening early. Jake stood, straightened his suit, and headed for the door. The others followed. The walk back to the council hall felt longer than it actually was. Other species in the corridors watched the human delegation pass. Some nodded respectfully. Others moved out of the way quickly, which hadn't happened before. Word had spread fast. When they entered the council hall, Jake was surprised to see it even more crowded than before the recess. Species that hadn't been there earlier had arrived. Some were standing because all the seats were full. The noise level was higher too, with dozens of conversations happening at once. Chancellor Kron called for order. "The Council will now address the human request for Level 3 technology sharing rights. Before we vote, several delegates have requested to speak. We will hear from them now." Elder Moss was first. The old Centaurian stood slowly, his wooden limbs creaking. "I have lived a long time. I have seen species rise and fall. I watched the Krell Empire grow strong, then collapse. I never knew humans were the cause of that collapse. Now that I know, I find myself considering what it means." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Humans are young, that is fact. Humans are aggressive, that is also fact. But humans are also restrained, capable of mercy, capable of rebuilding what war destroys. Those are facts too. I believe we have been seeing only part of what humanity is. Today, Ambassador Morrison showed us the complete picture. I find that picture complicated, but worthy of respect. Moss sat down. Several other delegates nodded in agreement. A delegate from a species called the Vexani stood next. They were silicon-based lifeforms, logical and unemotional by nature. I have reviewed the data Ambassador Morrison provided. The tactical evolution displayed by human forces during the Krell War is remarkable. They went from defensive posture to offensive capability in 18 months. They reverse-engineered and improved Krell technology in weeks. This demonstrates exceptional adaptability and learning capacity. From a logical standpoint, providing humans with advanced technology appears to be low risk. They will either develop it themselves eventually, or acquire it through other means. Cooperation seems more beneficial than restriction. More nods from the assembled delegates. Jake remained still, watching and listening, his face neutral. Then Ambassador Vera stood. The entire chamber went quiet. She had been silent since Jake's presentation, and everyone was curious about what she would say now. Vera's voice was different. The contempt was gone. The mockery was gone. She spoke quietly, and for the first time since Jake had met her, she sounded genuine. I owe the human delegation an apology. Specifically, I owe Ambassador Morrison an apology. She turned to face Jake directly. I made assumptions about your species based on incomplete information. I judged you by our standards, by our timeline, without understanding your context. I mocked your achievements. I dismissed your contributions. I was wrong to do so. Jake inclined his head slightly, but said nothing. Vera continued, and her voice grew stronger. What Ambassador Morrison showed us today was not meant to threaten us, it was meant to educate us. To show us that humanity is more complex than we believed, more dangerous than we assumed, but also more capable of growth and change than we gave them credit for. She paused. The Krell thought humans were weak because they offered mercy. I thought humans were primitive because they asked for help instead of demanding it. We were both wrong. Strength that can be restrained is more impressive than strength that cannot. Wisdom that seeks cooperation is more valuable than pride that insists on dominance. She sat down, and the chamber remained silent for a moment. Then a few delegates began to tap their appendages, a sign of approval in galactic culture. More joined in, until the sound filled the chamber. Chancellor Kron's silver mist swirled thoughtfully. Are there any other delegates who wish to speak before we vote? No one stood. Very well. The question before the Council is whether to grant humanity Level 3 technology sharing rights. By the Charter, we require a 2/3 majority for approval. All delegates may now register their votes. The voting system was instantaneous. Each delegate input their choice through their seat's console. The results appeared on the central display. Lisa held her breath. Kate gripped the arm of her chair. Jake just watched, calm and still. The numbers appeared. For approval, 87%. Against, 9%. Abstaining, 4%. The proposal passed with overwhelming support. Kate let out a breath she'd been holding. Lisa felt her shoulders relax, for the first time in hours. Jake closed his eyes briefly, then opened them and nodded once. Chancellor Kron spoke again. The Council has approved humanity's request. You will receive full access to Level 3 technologies within the standard 30-day implementation period. Additionally, several species have indicated interest in expanded partnerships with humanity. You will receive formal proposals shortly. Thank you, Chancellor, Jake said simply. However, Kron continued, and his tone changed slightly, I must note that this Council has concerns about the revelation of classified military information. While your actions were technically permitted under our charter, they have created significant diplomatic complications. Many species are now reassessing their relationship with humanity. This is not necessarily negative, but it is disruptive. The Council expects that Earth will be more forthcoming with relevant information in the future. I will relay that expectation to my government. This session is concluded. As delegates began to leave, several approached the human delegation. The Vexani representative wanted to discuss a technology exchange program. A species called the Porthon offered a military cooperation agreement. Even some of the delegates who had laughed at Jake 3 days ago came by to offer congratulations, though their congratulations felt more nervous than friendly. Ambassador Vera approached last. She stood before Jake, her forearms at her sides, her posture no longer arrogant, but respectful. I meant what I said, Ambassador. I was wrong about your species. I hope you can accept my apology. Jake studied her for a moment, then offered his hand in the human gesture of greeting. Vera looked at it, uncertain, then carefully reached out with one of her arms and clasped his hand. Apology accepted, Ambassador. We all make mistakes based on incomplete information. The important thing is learning from them. Yes, Vera agreed quietly. Learning. Humans seem very good at that. She left, and finally the human delegation was alone in their section of the chamber. Kate was grinning. The other diplomats were celebrating quietly. Lisa watched Jake, who stood looking at the now empty central platform where he'd made his presentation. "How do you feel?" she asked him. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Tired, mostly, and a little sad. Sad? We won. I know, but I wish we didn't have to reveal the Krell War to win. I wish respect was something given freely, rather than something we had to prove we deserved. I wish... He trailed off, then shook his head. It doesn't matter what I wish. We did what we had to do. They gathered their things and headed back to the delegation quarters. Along the way, Jake noticed how other species looked at them now. Not with contempt or amusement, but with caution and calculation. Respect, yes, but respect mixed with wariness. He'd changed humanity's reputation, but the cost was the loss of innocence. The galaxy no longer saw humans as harmless newcomers. They saw humans as they really were, dangerous when threatened, capable of great destruction, but also capable of restraint and mercy. That night, Jake sat alone in his quarters and wrote his report to Earth. He detailed the presentation, the vote, the reactions. He noted the new partnership offers. He explained the shift in how other species viewed humanity, and at the end, he added a personal note. We have gained respect and access to advanced technologies. We have secured humanity's place in galactic society. But we have also shown the galaxy our darker capabilities. Future generations will live with the consequences of that revelation. I believe it was necessary, but I'm not certain it was right. History will judge whether the price we paid was worth what we gained. He sent the report and sat back, looking out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, on thousands of worlds, species were discussing what they'd learned about humanity today. Some would see opportunity for partnership. Others would see a potential threat. Most would see both. Jake thought about General Carter's words from 3 days ago. Make sure this is really necessary. Make sure it's worth it. He still wasn't completely sure it was worth it, but it was done now. Humanity had stepped out of the shadows and into the light, showing the galaxy both their capacity for violence and their choice of peace. The truth had quieted the hall, as he'd hoped it would. Now they would live with the consequences of that truth. 5 years later, Jake Morrison retired from diplomatic service. He returned to Earth and took a teaching position at the Global Diplomatic Academy. His course on xenopolitics was always full, with students hanging on every word as he discussed the complexities of galactic relations. When asked about his most famous moment, his answer was always the same. I reminded them what humans have always been. Survivors who choose to build rather than destroy, whenever possible. Warriors who prefer peace, but won't accept subjugation. A young species learning to navigate an old galaxy, making mistakes and learning from them. And when students asked if he would do it again, if he would reveal the Krell War again, if given the choice, Jake would pause and think carefully before answering. Yes, he would finally say, because the alternative was accepting permanent inferiority. And humanity doesn't accept that. We can't. It's not in our nature to settle for less than we're capable of achieving. That drive to improve, to grow, to earn our place, that's what makes us human. Sometimes it leads to conflict. Sometimes it leads to revelation. But it always leads to change. The students would nod and take notes, and Jake would look out the window at the sky, remembering a day when he stood before the galaxy and showed them what humanity really was. Not perfect, not innocent, but worthy of respect. And that in the end was all he'd ever wanted to prove.